Okay, so if you've been following along with us, let me give you a quick recap to get you up to speed so that makes sense, okay? So we've been following this guy named Nehemiah. And Nehemiah is from Jerusalem originally, but he was taken into exile, his family was, 141 years prior to Nehemiah's coming in the story of this book. And so he's taken into exile to a capital city called Susa. And in Susa, he was a cupbearer to the king. He was a well-treated slave, essentially. But God put it on his heart to go do a mighty work back in Jerusalem and to rebuild the city walls and to reestablish the city of Jerusalem because it was in shambles, okay? It was in shambles, let's be honest. And so God actually grants him favor. He asks the king, can I go back to Jerusalem with your people, with your money, with your resources? And the king says, sure, that sounds good, which is a miracle. And so he's sent back, and when he gets there, he starts to rebuild the city wall because that's how cities protected themselves in that day. And he begins building the wall with all his people, and then detractors show up. People don't want the wall to go up. Opposition shows up. He tells them to take a hike. He eventually gets over the opposition in many different ways. And so after the wall is built, they begin rebuilding their schools and their buildings and all of the things, and then they hold a great church gathering. They hold this massive church gathering, and then they celebrate through doing different feasts and festivals. And then eventually, like we heard last week, they cast lots to see who would move into the city and who would remain outside of the city. And so what we find ourselves today is in this crazy passage of citywide celebration with singing and music and festivals, and they're dedicating the wall and the town to God. And so they're going to reestablish this city, and they're going to say, God, this is for you. And so this is actually a great way to end the book of Nehemiah, through a celebration. Now, the underlying theme of this entire passage is actually the concept of worship. The concept of worship. Now, I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't grow up in the church at all. I became a Christian in college, but I did go to church. And when I heard the word worship, I'll be honest with you, I got creeped out. Many of you have heard, I watched a lot of scary movies growing up. When I hear the word worship, I just do some weird word association, and I start thinking really bizarre things, okay? And so I'm thinking about people bowing down to like pigs and eagles and all sorts of weird stuff. And so that's where my head goes when I heard the word worship. Some people think of creepy things. Some people think of primitive things when they hear this word worship. But a lot of us think about foreign things. People that worship, they're somewhere else, okay? And for some of you that grew up in the church, when you hear worship, you think of like really bad music, okay? Like this music you turn off when it comes on, or really good music for some of you, right? That's what you think of when you hear worship. But there's an interesting concept of worship, and I think, and I'm guessing, many of us, some of us don't grasp what worship really, truly, and deeply means, okay? Some of us probably think worship is a thing that we can do. You worship, maybe literally sing music like we just did. You worship things, and some people worship Jesus, and some people worship another God, and then some people don't worship, right? There's some people that worship and some people that don't. Well, actually, it turns out it's not whether or not you worship, it's about what you worship. We all are unceasing worshipers. In fact, the Bible teaches us we were all created for worship. And so we do worship something. Many of us think, I either make a decision to worship or I don't. Turns out you worship something. So we have capacity to worship. And so what I want to do is I want to give you a framework for understanding this concept of worship. And then I'm going to position it for our passage in Nehemiah so we get a really good understanding of what this is. And you're going to be able to figure out what you worship. You're going to be able to figure out what you worship. So, good thing the Bible gives us a great definition of worship. Romans 11:36 through 12:1, it says this. For from him, that's God, and through him, and to him all things are all things. To him be the glory forever. Amen. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Okay, so I'm going to unpack this for you. But essentially, there are three major concepts happening in this passage. Okay, you have glory, which I'm going to explain. You have to present, which essentially means to dedicate. And then you have to sacrifice. Glory, dedication, sacrifice. We're going to run through all of these. First thing, Worship is putting something in a position of glory. Now, if you watch a lot of boxing movies, you hear the word glory, you kind of just think that means like Rocky Balboa is lifting his hand and he's got glory or something, right? Like that's your only thought of what glory is. But glory actually, in the Bible, the literal translation of glory means weight. It means a weight or weightiness. There's some gravitas to it. And another way you can say it is some spiritual significance. There's some weight to what people say. There's some weight to what people do or what people are or who God is. And so that's going to help us frame up this idea of glory. But functionally this means that we have decided to put something in a position or something, someone, or some concept in position of glory or significance in our lives, because worship is putting something in position of glory. So we have put something in this position of ultimate significance in our lives. So let me ask you a question. What is that in your life right now? Just at the top of your head before we hear the rest of the sermon. What is the thing you've put in position of glory, position of significance, position of gravitas in your life? What is it? What is that number one thing? Now, some of us will say, listen, that's kind of silly. We worship God, we worship some other God, or we worship no God at all. That's how it works. We worship a being or we don't. Pretty simple. There's no in the middle here. Well, actually, the Bible says, again, we are unceasing worshipers, and the object of our worship, what we hold in most significance, will change if it's not God. It will actually change. It will default to something else. Weird to think about. Here's the passage that explains that for you. Romans 1:22-25. Listen to this. Claiming to be wise, hey, by the way, they're talking to us right here. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies and among themselves, because, listen to this, they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is forever blessed. Amen. So here's what they're doing. They're taking the glory of God, the significance, the weight of what God means in their life, and they're trading it. Now, what are they trading it for? Look at verse 24. It says God gives them over to the lusts of their hearts. What is their deepest lustful desire? They're trading God for that. That's what's happening. So it may be literal lust, it may be sex, it may be money, it may be power, it may be fame, it may be to build the greatest business of all time. Whatever it is you put in that position of most significance, that's what they're exchanging God for. Now, if you look at verse 23, you're thinking they exchanged the glory of immortal God for like images resembling man and birds and animals, and you're thinking, that's my idea of worship. Giant totem pole, bear, eagle, fox, I don't know, like that thing, people bow down to that. That makes sense to me. But it turns out that we do the same thing in our own hearts and minds, just not literally with a giant totem pole, okay? Look at verse 25. Again, it says that we exchange the truth about God for a lie, and we serve the creature, it says, rather than the Creator. So what do? We trade the Creator for His creation. And we begin to worship creation instead of Creator. So God asks us to do certain things. God calls us to a specific life. And we say, God, I know you're important in my life, and I got you on the list, but I actually want to trade you for some of the things you've made. I actually really like power. I actually really like sex. I actually really like money. I actually really like comfort. So I'm actually going to trade you for one of those things. I'm going to actually, unbeknownst to me, I've got those things in highest position of glory or significance, and God is actually second, third, fourth, or seventh. You get it? We've traded. So I'm going to ask the question again. What in your life is in position of most significance? What in your life is in position of most significance? What have you traded God for? What have you traded God for? Now in Jerusalem, they worshiped God, at least at this point in the story. In this moment, they are worshiping God. And look, if you look with me at verse 27, we can see this manifestation of them putting God in position of glory. It says, at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought the Levites in all their places to bring them to Jerusalem to celebrate the dedication with gladness, with thanksgivings, with singing, cymbals, harps, and lyres. they have gathered and they're going to sing to God with instruments. And they're saying, essentially, with this celebration, God, we know we've messed up in the past. We know we've put these different things in front of you, but actually we want to return you to your rightful spot in our hearts. And what we're going to do is we're going to celebrate that by returning you to your position of glory. You see that? Follow me. Number 2, worship means dedication, dedicating yourself to something. Worship means dedicating yourself to something. So you hold it in position of glory, but you also are going to dedicate yourself to something. Now you're thinking, well, what does that exactly mean if I hold something in position of glory? Look back with me at Romans 11:36. For from him and through him are all things. From him and through him are all things. Let's skip down right here. Listen, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. And so what we do when we present, we dedicate our bodies as a living sacrifice. And so in order for us to hold something in position of glory, we have to dedicate ourselves to it. So I'm going to give you some examples. The other question you can ask yourself in this is, what am I doing with my body, my time, and my effort to prepare for what's coming to worship this person of glory? What am I doing? So to present, 4 things you can present. One of the things you can present is you present your effort. You can present your effort to whatever is in your position of significance. How do you do that? Essentially, you say this: here is my energy. Here is my energy. Here is where all my thoughts go. Here is where my hands go. Here is what my mind is consumed with. Here's what fills my inbox. Here is what consumes all of my friendships. I'm giving you and presenting all of my energy. So you're saying, okay, whatever I worship, here it is. Here's my energy. What else can you dedicate? You can dedicate your time. When you dedicate your time, you say, here is my calendar. Here is my calendar. Yes, sometimes you don't put stuff on your Google or your Exchange calendar. We're not talking about that calendar. We're talking about the way you spend your time, okay? So when you go back and you audit your days, you essentially can look back and say, what have I presented my time to? What have I presented my time to? You can also dedicate your body, your physical body. You can dedicate your physical body. When you do that, you say, here is my physical body. Now, here's what's interesting. In the Western world, we're very dualistic. What do I mean by that? What I mean is we look at the body and the spirit and soul as if they're 2 separate things. And so what we do is we say, I can worship with my heart and my mind and my thoughts, but ultimately my body's my own. And so even though my body's doing different things, my mind is actually with you. But in other cultures, in other countries, particularly in the East, there's a synergy. There's actually, they see this, the mind and the body and the spirit as one. And so your body can't functionally do something different than your brain. If you say, no, Lord God, I'm not an alcoholic. No, this isn't who I am. Someone in the East would say, well, but you drink 4 days a week. No, but that's just not who I am. Well, actually, your body is doing something different. And so we've presented our body to some cause that is either Jesus or it's something else, right? And you have to assess, what is that, okay? Now in Jerusalem, they dedicated their body. They literally dedicated their body. Verse 30, it says, the priests and the Levites purified themselves, and they purified the people and the gates and the wall. Now, this word purify, to purify is an action we do in readiness for some sort of solemn act. Okay, so when we purify ourselves, we're getting ready. Think about like a primitive warrior. How does he get ready for a battle? He puts his face paint on, and he grabs his spear, and he tightens his boots, right? He's getting ready. He's purifying himself. He's dedicating himself to a specific cause, okay? And we can do this with our bodies. And one of the most horrendous example is a Raider fan. And if you're in here, we love you. I hope you meet Jesus today. I'm just kidding. You go to a Raider game and they've painted up their faces. They've got shoulder pads with spikes, and they've got boots, and they're definitely concealing weaponry that they will use on someone in the parking lot to commit felonies that they've dedicated themselves to, okay? That's what you see in the Bay Area. Some of you are not laughing and you love the Raiders. Oh my goodness, we'll pray for you, We actually see, and so what's one interesting thing? I actually heard this idea of where a bunch of theologians brought people from other cultures and dropped them in the middle of football stadiums. And they just said, what do you think about what's happening here? And because when we go to your culture, we see temples, we see different religions, we see chickens being sacrificed and all sorts of crazy stuff. What do you see here? And they say, oh, I see an even bigger temple. That's what I see. I see people dedicating themselves to birds and creeping things, bears, seahawks, falcons, and I see them dressed like they're little gods in spandex as they worship them, and when they lose, they get depressed. And when they win, they celebrate with alcohol. That's what I see. And this is actually true. We can actually see that happen. So we do dedicate ourselves with our bodies. It just might not be in the way you are thinking about. So we have to be very, very careful. Another way you can dedicate yourself with your body is by looking at this little lowercase g God in your pocket. When you audit your time, I would like you to audit exactly how much time you spend on this. And if I were to come into the United States from 1940 and I were to walk around a bus station, and well, for one, buses are like a lot more prevalent than they were in the 1940s, right? So that's crazy. But other than that, what would we see? We would see a bunch of people with these little devices in their hands, these little lowercase g gods, and they would be pecking away at them, answering them, because when they talk, we listen. Buzz, open, look. Bing, open, look. Bing, serve me with dopamine and serotonin as I look at you. And you would receive that dopamine and serotonin in thanks. And then what you would do is that you would download more apps so it gives you more serotonin and more dopamine. And that's what we'd see. And we'd also see these little white things in your ears. Because who wants to hear anything else if you could just hear your God go off all day? So you'll put that in your ears and you'll do this. And therefore, you don't see anybody else but just dedication and worship to the glory of the lowercase g God. You get what I'm saying? Where is your time going? Where is your time going? It might be to that thing. You can also dedicate your money. Probably the easiest one you could think about, right? You can dedicate your money. When you dedicate your money, you say this: here is my bank account. Here's my bank account. Here's my Chase app or my Wells Fargo or my debit card. Here it is. And you give your money to the causes you put in position of glory. And so if you audit your bank account over the last several years, you can say, what have I given my money to? Okay? In Jerusalem, they dedicated themselves to what they held in glory to. But in this case, it was God. It was God. Look at verse 31 with me. It says, then I brought the leaders of Judah up onto the wall and appointed 2 great choirs that gave thanks. One went to the south of the wall of the dung gate, and after them went Hoshaziah and half of the leaders of Judah. So what they did was they split up across all of Jerusalem in the city wall, and what did they do? They brought 2 giant choirs in, and they sung. They dedicated themselves in worship to a great cause, to what they've held in position of glory. That's God. And they sang, and they sang, and they sang. What we find is actually there's 2 forms of worship. We have the gathered worship, which is what we just did, where we gather together and we actually sing. We call that worship music. And we're singing to God, and we're praising God, and we're dedicating ourselves to God. But then we also have scattered worship. Scattered worship is what you physically, literally, physiologically, mentally, spiritually worship. What will people say about you when you go, and what will they know about what you worship? Is it a phone? Is it money? What is it? Is it another person? What is it? That's our scattered worship. Question for you. Ask yourself this: what have I dedicated myself to? And not what you think you dedicated yourself to. Think about your time, your effort, your energy, your money, and your body. Where have those things gone? That will tell you what you've placed in position of glory. Is it God? Is it another God? Is it a person? Is it an act? Is it a concept? What is it? Okay? Next, so worship, we hold something in position of glory. Worship means we dedicate ourselves to something. And next, worship is making sacrifices for whatever is most important. So whatever's in your position of glory, you're going to make sacrifices actually for it. You're going to trade things. And so that's a better question. What trade will you make? What trade will you make for the thing that you've placed in position of glory? Now, with our things, let's start with at the top of them. Effort. What effort are you going to trade? For what? Hobbies take a lot of time, right? If you're going to do a hobby, you can't give that effort to something else. And so if you only golf, if you golf all the time, it's not a sin to golf. It's a sin to golf constantly and to neglect everything else. What effort will you make? What trade will you make in that? With your effort, will you pursue comfort and therefore you can't pursue other things? So will you pursue Netflix and comfort and not a job? Will you pursue beer on the weekends and hanging out on the weekends and not school? What trade will you make with your effort? You have to make a trade. What about your time? Sometimes the objects of worship or significance in our life, they take a tremendous amount of time. So if you go out to the club 3-4 nights a week, you're going to sacrifice sleep, okay? You're trading sleep for the glory of the fun. Is it a sin to have fun? Of course not. It's a sin to only have fun. Do you get what I'm saying? If this thing is in the number one position and everything else falls by the wayside, then you can tell what you've placed in glorious significance. You might trade time and vacations, and maybe you're the serial vacationer, go on vacation every weekend, except for this one. You're here now. Every weekend, every vacation. Relationships don't build. Extra work at work doesn't go in. School falls by the wayside. Other relationships with other people don't work out. You're trading time. It's not a sin to work. We all love work. Work is created before the fall of man. It's a good thing. But if you always work, you're trading relationship with your children, relationships with your spouse, relationships with your family. You're trading. You're making a trade. If you work 90, 100 hours a week, you make that trade. What about your body? What about your body? What trade will you make with your body? What trade will you make with your body? Your body cannot be fully healthy if you love eating Doritos and Ho-Hos and Ding Dongs, and you say, no, but I'm a healthy person. Well, you're actually not, because we just know that can't happen, okay? It's not a sin to eat Ho-Hos, it's a sin to always eat Ho-Hos, okay? You cannot eat only Ho-Hos, okay? It doesn't work. You have to trade something. You will trade your health of your lungs if you always smoke. You make a trade, okay? If you always drink, you trade the health of your liver. You trade the relationships amongst you when those things eventually break down around you, okay? You're making a trade with your body. Your body can't go to your future spouse if it goes to your boyfriend, girlfriend. Your body can't be dedicated to God if it goes to pornography. Those two things can't coexist. You can't simultaneously honor your future spouse and also your boyfriend or girlfriend at the same time. Can't happen. You're making a trade in this, okay? The quintessential verse, by the way, for this is, if we throw up Romans 12:1 for me, let's look at this. If you ask someone, hey, why are you sleeping with your girlfriend? And you'll say, well, I just love my girlfriend. I said, well, actually, you worship your girlfriend. You say, I don't worship my girlfriend. That's crazy. And I said, okay, well, you present your body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to the girl. You worship that person. No, I don't. No, you've placed them as a higher authority than what God's asked you to do. Functionally, despite what your brain may tell you, your body has been offered as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to the lowercase g God. Okay? You've made that trade. The next thing, money. What trade will you make with your money? Unless some of you are bankrolled, you're going to have to trade something, okay? Because we have a finite amount, probably, I'm guessing, okay? We're going to have to trade things. And God says, he says, you can't serve two masters. You can't do two things with your money at the same time. You cannot go to the liquor store and buy alcohol with that same money also take your daughter to get ice cream, okay? You can only use that money one time. That means you have to make a trade with your money. And this is truthfully the easiest one to audit. You can audit this because we have like bank statements and we have mint.com and all these cool things, and you can actually go in and look at your money and say, man, what have I been giving my money to? Has it been to takeout? Has it been probably, right? Man, I keep meaning to sign up for Postmates, And they keep charging me the fee, and I know I'm eventually it's okay, I'll just pay it this time. And then pretty soon you're like, man, that's $75 worth of Postmate charges. If I just would have signed up. Anyway, that's my own thing. It's a very easy one to audit. What do you do with your money? Does your money go to providing for your family, giving to different charities, supporting other people, doing righteous things like paying your rent, paying your electric bill? Or does it go to crazy things that maybe you're overspending on? Too many vacations, too many experiences, too many trips to the bar. What are you spending your money on, okay? Here's the deal with all these trades, okay? When you make the trade, you lose the trade. You come up short. Any trade you make in exchange for God is an unfair trade, and friends, you got ripped off. You got ripped off when you made the trade. You see, God is a much more valuable, bigger trade asset than anything you traded for him. And so God greatly outweighs any seemingly better deal you think you got. Even in the moment, he still outweighs it in the long term. God makes you righteous, other things can defile you. Jesus, God brings you joy, and other things leave you unfulfilled. God satisfies, and other things leave you wanting more. And so you make more trades, and more trades, and more trades, and more trades until you either stop or you continue on your path. Now, many may feel, I really don't know if this applies to me. I get this. I feel like this is maybe too deep for me. I don't know if this is this really kind of hits home for me. Maybe you're just a Christian and you feel like, man, I'm all fine by myself. Or maybe, hey, I'm not a Christian. Maybe this is a Christian deal. Here's the big problem with all of that thinking, guys. People will not take you seriously if what you say doesn't align with what you worship. Everybody can see what you are putting in your position of most significance. And if it hasn't come to light yet, it will. It will. Your momentary pleasure from experiencing the trade of putting something else in position of most significance to God will eventually boomerang from pleasure back to pain. And you will experience returns on investment in the form of pain, of sorrow, of broken relationships. You'll experience those as your ROI, okay? That's a really important concept. In other words, what you do speaks louder than what you say. What you do speaks louder than what you say. We live in a day where it's totally common to say one thing and be completely the opposite. Like, for instance, I'm not on the stage right now. I know you think I'm on the stage, but I'm actually not here. That's your opinion and thought process of me, but actually I'm not actually on the stage right now, okay? That's the common thinking. Well, what you do speaks louder than what you say. You say, Eddie, you are crazy. I don't know what was in the coffee this morning, but you're standing on the stage. Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess I actually should look at what's actually the facts and find out that I am on the stage, okay? Here's the deal. Everything you trade for God is a taker. It's going to take from you. It's going to provide you momentary pleasure, and then it's going to take time, effort, energy, and money from you. This is a really good example because all of us are doing it. So that's why I'm holding it up. But you can substitute the phone for whatever it is you're thinking about right now. You get momentary pleasure, but you make a huge, unreasonable trade as a result. But guys, Jesus is not a taker, he's a giver. Jesus is a giver, not a taker. While all other things are going to take from you, Jesus is actually going to give. Your job, working too many hours at the office, trying to build your company, climb the corporate ladder, it will create stress, but Jesus, he will give you peace. Your relationships will create tension. They will create crazy amounts of tension in your life, but Jesus, he gives relief. Other things will defile you. Jesus will make you clean. He'll make you clean. When you worship God and let him give pleasure, the fill is so full and it is so deep, and he always over-delivers on the trade. He always over-delivers on the trade. Everything else always under-delivers. Jesus is going to over-deliver. Look at verse 43 with me. Look how the people in Jerusalem, as they worship, look what happened in their hearts. It says, and they offered great sacrifices. that day and rejoiced, for God had made them rejoice with great joy. The women and the children also rejoiced, and the joy of Jerusalem was heard far away. What was the result of them following Jesus? Joy. Joy. Joy, not momentary happiness, deep, utter joy. Joy in the midst of sorrow, in the midst of stress, in the midst of conflict, in the midst of difficult relationship circumstances, death, pennilessness, debt. Jesus provides more joy in the midst of all of those things. And when we make a trade with God for something else to try to band-aid one of those problems, the band-aid is like one of those wet slip, it just falls right off and you continue to bleed. Jesus is going to provide more for us, friends. Now, what was the result of their joy? I don't know if you caught this last part here. It says, and the joy of Jerusalem was heard far away. Even with walls around the city. Even with walls around the city, people heard them praising joy, giving joy to God as a result of what Jesus or God was doing in their heart. What will people hear you are joyous about? When you go out into your workspace or your family or your school, whatever it may be, what are people going to hear you excited about? What are people going to hear you've placed in position of most significance? What will you be known by? What will San Francisco and the Bay Area hear from your lips as you cry out and be heard far away? What are they going to hear from you? Are you going to cry out in joy like them? Are you going to scream with pleasure that God has changed you? That you're empowered, that you don't no longer fear? That you're no longer afraid of death? That you're no longer afraid of judgment of other people? Or do you want to be marred by that? Do you want to be owned that? Will you cry out in momentary happiness and pleasure only for that to boomerang back to pain? Or will you cry in deep-seated pain and slavery from your dictator, object of worship? You cry out, friends. The question is what you will cry out in. Will it be joy or will it not be? Guys, I want you to worship Jesus today. I don't know, maybe I don't normally end a sermon like that, but worship Jesus. He's a good God. You may be living your life right now marred by other people's circumstances, marred by what's been done to you, marred by what you've done to others. You've traded something for glory, for God's glory. You've traded something. Worship God. Worship God. Friends, the things you've traded God for are thieves. They are thieves and they steal your joy. And some of us have never even felt a deep-seated joy in our entire lives. I want you to take your joy back today and look at what Jesus says about this. It's not on the board. It says, the thief, our gods, our lowercase g gods, come only to steal, to kill, and to destroy. But Jesus came, I came, that they may have life and have it abundantly. Wouldn't you rather have that? I would rather have that. Friends, your life begins today. Put to death your thief and take up your Savior. Let's pray.